All right, welcome back from your break. This is Dr. Matthew J. Traum from Engineer Inc. This is the third video in a series on how to assemble, calibrate, and take measurements using the PASCO stress-strain apparatus. We've got the stress-strain apparatus here now almost fully assembled. There's just one more component to go. I showed you guys how to put on the rotary to linear motion actuator, the rotational sensor, and the lever here. The next component that we are going to look at is going to be the force sensor. But before we do that, I do want to point out one thing, which is when I installed this band between the rotational to linear actuator and the rotational sensor, I just naturally put the rubber band on the largest spool setting here. It turns out there's actually 3 different spools. There's a big spool, a medium spool, and a small spool. And when checking the instructions, it says that the rubber band wants to be on the middle spool. So I am going to move the rubber band over, there we go, to the middle spool. If I had left it on the big spool, I would get some very strange results. So now it's on the correct spool, and I can move into the next step, which is the installation of the force sensor. So here is the force sensor. Notice that it's got 2 holes in it. This is for PASCO experiments where you pull on things with your hands. It's also got a 0 button, which we will use later on in the experiment. And it's got 2 holes. One of the holes can run something straight through it, like that. The other one is a threaded hole. If you want to mount something to the threaded hole, we're going to use the straight through hole. And then it's got this large hole with this set screw in it, and that large hole ultimately is going to fit over this pin. So that's how it's going to operate. Now you're looking at all the various information here on the sensor. This is the part number, by the way, PASCO PS2104. It's a standalone part separate from the stress-strain apparatus. And the other thing that's important to notice is this 50 newtons maximum in either direction. So that's the maximum force that you can put on this sensor before, well, you get close to damaging it. So no more than 50 newtons. And that explains the need for this lever arm, in that some of the sample coupons that we're going to look at require forces as large as 250 newtons to deform and ultimately to cause them to fail. And so if we're imposing 250 newtons of force and this sensor can only handle 50 newtons of force, we're going to have a problem. We're going to break the sensor. And so again, what this lever arm does is it essentially reduces the force by 5 times, because it's a 5-to-1 lever, and that allows a 250 newton force to be measured by a 50 newton force sensor. So we're going to install this now by essentially sliding it over the pin that's in the base of the unit. Now, I talked before about, being conscious of where the wires are, and your natural inclination, since this wire runs off to the left, is to probably say, well, I want to flip this over and have the wire naturally run off to the right. That's sort of the natural common sense thing to do. The problem with that is that the holes don't line up, and so you'll have a problem mounting it this way if you try to do that. So what we're going to do is just be very careful. We're going to mount it right side up, and we're going to run this wire back underneath so that it doesn't interfere with anything, so that it's out of the way. But we are going to install it with the wire kind of poking out to the left, which is, again, a bit counterintuitive. So notice in the base there is a hole here. This hole is threaded, and this is a knurled threaded machine screw, and it fits and screws into that hole. So we're going to use that screw to hold down the force sensor. So what I'm going to do is just back off the set screw here. So check to make sure that the set screw is not inside that pinhole. And then I'm going to slide this guy over. I'm going to leave it loose. I'm not going to mess with the set screw yet, but I can wobble this back and forth a little bit. I'm going to make sure that the lever is free from the tip of the force sensor, and then I'm going to put this guy in the hole that is the non-threaded hole in the force sensor. And when I hit the bottom, if I've lined it up correctly, I should be able to just screw this down. Again, it's knurled, so I should be able to just screw it finger tight, into that threaded hole into the base unit. Continue here until it's tight. Okay, so now it's tight. Great. And then I'm going to finish up by, with two hands, just putting the set screw back in place. So remember, righty-tighty, I'm going to turn this guy clockwise from my perspective, and the set screw is going to tighten up against that rigid metal pin on the base. There we go. Okay, and now this guy's in there nice and rigid, nice and firm. It's not going anywhere. And now I just want to be careful with the wire. So I'm going to run the wire kind of just underneath the spindle of the force sensor, so it's out of the way. Of the rotational sensor, so it's out of the way. And I should be set. So now I've got the stress strain apparatus fully assembled, and now the next step is to worry about data acquisition. So I'm going to move this out of the way and show you how to plug in the components into the data acquisition box, which in my case is the PASCO 850 universal interface. So here is the front face of the PASCO 850 universal interface. I've got it plugged in, I've got it powered off, but it's plugged in both to power and to the computer. And so all I'm going to do then is just take these wires, which come off of the PASCO sensors, the rotational sensor and the force sensor, and I'm going to just plug them in to passport 1 and passport 2. Now these are directional, so I can plug it in there. That's one sensor. Here's the other sensor. Now let me try to plug it in upside down, and I'll just show you what happens. If I try to plug it in upside down, it won't actually go, right? See, look at that. It won't actually fit if I try to plug it in upside down. So these are idiot proof in that you can only plug them in one way, just like that. And once I've got everything plugged in, and I've got it connected to power and connected to the computer, I can hit the power button here, and things start to light up. And there you have it. So now we've got our connection. So I'm going to now pull this out of the field of view. We don't need to worry about it anymore since it's powered up and we're collecting data. So I'm going to move this sensor and stress strain apparatus back into view. There we go. Okay. And now we've got it all assembled, and we are ready to do the calibration and start collecting some data. So that's the end of this video. I'll see you guys back here in just a moment after I've given you a break so that you can do your own force sensor installation and plugging in components into the 850 universal apparatus. So see you in just a moment.